There comes a point when you begin to feel like a spectator in your own life. Everyone is talking, everyone is reacting, everyone is performing emotion, certainty, outrage, charm, and yet nobody is saying anything. You sit there listening, not with fascination, but with fatigue, a strange fatigue, the exhaustion of the performance. You watch the room laugh too loudly, explain too much, defend too quickly, fill every silence as if silence itself were dangerous, and something in you no longer wants to join it. Not because you are shy, not because you have nothing to say, but because you can feel the cost of unnecessary speech now. You can hear when words are used to cover fear, to chase approval, to manage perception, to avoid the unbearable weight of simply being still. And if you are the high-functioning outsider, if you are the silent strategist, you already know this feeling. The older your awareness becomes, the less interest you have in noise. Because awakened minds do not go silent by accident. They go silent when they finally understand what most people are doing with their words. Let us say something clearly. Your silence is not always personality. Sometimes it is history. Some people became quiet because life trained them to study the atmosphere before they entered it, to read the room, to predict moods, to detect danger in tone, timing, facial tension, footsteps, silence itself. This is not simple introversion. This is what I call traumatic intelligence. A nervous system refined by unpredictability, a mind that learned early that participation could be costly, that words could be used against you, that honesty could trigger punishment, that being fully visible was not always safe, so you adapted. You learned to observe before speaking, to measure before trusting, to sense emotional weather faster than others, and over time, this became power. But first, it was survival. That is why shallow people misunderstand your quietness. They think you lack confidence. They think you are distant. They think you are withholding. No, you are processing 10 layers deeper than the average person in the room. They hear conversation. You hear motive. They hear words. You hear compensation. They hear opinions. You hear insecurity trying to stabilize itself through volume. That kind of awareness changes a person. Once you have seen how much human speech is driven by fear, you stop feeling obligated to contribute to it. There is a painful phase in awakening when you still try to explain yourself to people who were never listening to understand you. You explain your boundaries, your changes, your distance, your healing, your silence, and what happens? They do not feel closer to you. They simply gather more material to interpret you with. This is where many awakened minds begin to withdraw from unnecessary speech, because they realize something brutal. Explanation does not guarantee understanding. In the wrong ears, it only creates more surfaces for distortion. The unawakened mind wants language it can control. The awakened mind begins to value inner congruence over outer agreement. That is the turning point. You stop speaking to be approved. You stop clarifying every misunderstanding. You stop trying to rescue your image inside the minds of people committed to seeing you through their own wounds. And once that shift happens, your words become fewer, cleaner, sharper, because the need to be understood by everyone is a form of dependency. And awakened minds are slowly, painfully, learning how to live without that dependency. In the Jungian path, there is a subtle maturity that begins to emerge after enough suffering has been metabolized. Call it wisdom, call it integration, call it the Sophia Stage. A stage where consciousness becomes quieter, clearer, less reactive to every sting of the world. Before this stage, life feels personal. Every rejection pierces the ego. Every criticism demands response. Every cold tone invites overthinking. But then something changes. Not outside, inside. You stop identifying with every disturbance. Chaos still happens. People still project. Rooms still turn strange. Voices still sharpen. Misunderstanding still arrives. But it does not land in the same place anymore. The ego is no longer the center of every bruise. You become a clear space. Not numb, not cold, clear. That is why awakened minds often talk less, because they are no longer trying to constantly push against reality. They are no longer wrestling every impression into a statement. The Sophia Stage is not loud enlightenment. It is quiet depth. The discovery that not every provocation deserves a personality. Not every social tension deserves your explanation. Not every misunderstanding deserves your defense. Some things pass through you without touching the throne, and when that happens, words naturally reduce. If you are the high-functioning outsider, you have likely lived this contradiction for years. You perform well, you remain composed, you understand systems, moods, motives, fractures. People assume you are simply reserved, but what they do not see is how much you notice. You notice the false enthusiasm, the subtle competition inside friendly conversation, the desperation hidden inside charisma, the way people overtalk when they are afraid of being seen clearly. And after a while, shallow social rituals begin to feel expensive. Not morally wrong, just expensive. They drain your nervous system. They demand performance without depth, presence without sincerity, speech without truth. So you begin preserving yourself. This is what many people mistake as withdrawal, but often it is conservation. The awakened mind is not antisocial by nature. It is anti-friction. It stops investing heavily in dynamics that require self-betrayal just to remain comfortable. And that means fewer words, not because you are empty, but because you are no longer willing to spend language where there is no real exchange. Now we move from psychology to power. Machiavelli understood something the average person never learns. The one who explains the most usually holds the weaker position. The one rushing to clarify, defend, justify, soften, convince, is often the one still negotiating for permission. Awakened minds begin to understand a harder law. Never explain what does not require explanation. This is not arrogance. It is sovereignty. When you stop trying to manage every perception of you, you reclaim enormous power, because people feed on access. Your language, your defensiveness, your emotional leakage. Many social games survive only because you keep supplying them with your energy. The awakened mind eventually sees this, and once it sees it, it becomes dangerous. Not because it attacks, but because it stops volunteering its interior to every passing demand. Silence then becomes a form of dominance, a refusal to collapse inward every time the world requests an explanation, a refusal to make your peace dependent on public correction. That is why silence unsettles insecure people. They do not know whether you are hurt, amused, detached, informed, or simply done. And ambiguity is power, when it is rooted in genuine self-possession. One of the deepest reasons your silence intimidates people is because silence becomes a mirror. When you are not constantly revealing yourself, performing your innocence, or filling the air with self-explanation, others are left alone with themselves, and many people cannot tolerate that. They want noise because noise protects them from reflection. They want easy banter because banter keeps depth away. They want you chatty, available, transparent, slightly anxious, because that makes them comfortable. But when you are composed and quiet, they begin to project. They call you cold, arrogant, mysterious, judgmental. Why? because your silence does not tell them who they are to you. So they are forced to confront who they are with no reassurance. That is the mirror effect. Your quietness exposes the hidden shadows in other people, their insecurity, their need for approval, their discomfort with stillness, their fear of being insignificant without performance. And this is why the silent strategist is often misunderstood. Not because they are unclear, but because they refuse to constantly relieve others of self-confrontation. Something beautiful begins to happen when a person no longer needs to fill silence. Their words become weighted, not many, but precise. Awakened minds do not always speak less because they know less. Often, they speak less because they have seen how language loses force when overused. They understand timing, compression, restraint. They know that truth does not need 10 paragraphs when one clean sentence will do. They know that constant talking is often a defense against contact with the self. So they choose language the way a strategist uses movement. Deliberately, economically, only when the moment calls for it. And because of that, people remember what they say. This is one of the paradoxes of awakened silence. The less you speak from compulsion, the more your speech begins to carry presence, not performance. Presence. And presence is always more powerful than volume. The world may call this distance, but often it is inner order. There is a difference between emotional shutdown and sacred reserve. Awakened minds learn to protect their psychic space. They become careful about what enters it, what lingers there, what consumes it. Not every conversation deserves access. Not every person deserves full visibility. Not every question deserves an answer. This is not cruelty, it is discernment. When you have spent enough years recovering from overstimulation, projection, chaos, misunderstanding, or emotional trespass, silence stops feeling empty. It begins to feel expensive, holy even. And you stop handing it away for free. So if you no longer talk too much, if you no longer explain every shift in your soul, if you no longer defend yourself to those who only listen to distort, do not mistake that for emptiness. It may be the clearest sign yet that you have begun to awaken, that your nervous system is no longer available for shallow noise, that your ego no longer rushes to answer every sting, that your mind is becoming a place of order instead of reaction. This is the path of the silent strategist. This is the dignity of the high-functioning outsider, and this is the quiet power of a mind that no longer needs the room to agree in order to remain whole. If that is you, drop the word sovereign in the comments. Not for attention, for recognition. A signal that you have claimed your peace.